All right, good morning. Looks like we have enough here to get started at least. Call this meeting for the Water Commission to order at 8:05 a.m. for Thursday, October 20th, 2016. We'll do a roll call. Miss Bernie is not going to be attending this morning, and it looks like Mr. Jordan has not arrived yet, so the rest of us are here. All right, item number 3, changes to the agenda. Are there any changes?
No, Chair.
Okay. We'll move on to public comment. Item number 4. Looks like we had someone submit public comment to make. Mr. Jim Zender. All right, would you like to come up? You got 2 minutes to share with us what you'd like to talk about.
My name is Jim Zender. I'm just a private citizen, not representing anybody other than myself. That? Right there? All right. My name is Jim Zender. I'm just representing myself, I'm a private citizen, not here representing anybody. And the purpose for my being here is just because I want to get a better understanding of what the city of Santa Barbara's position is on development. I've had numerous occasions in my private life just to be exposed to various media things and just observation of development that's going on in within the city limits, and I've wondered, and I know that perhaps some of you can answer this question, but I've wondered why it is that there's development going on, whether it's a private residence or something that requires quite a few toilets and sinks and stuff like that. And I can see that going on. I've only lived here in this community for 5.5 years. I moved here from Santa Maria. So I'm a real estate appraiser. And part of my job is to look at stuff. So as I drive around doing my job, I see what's pretty obvious to most of us with the ability to see development going on. And when I read in various media outlets, both nationally and locally, that this part of our country is involved in a drought thing, I have to wonder, as a private citizen, why am I being asked to conserve water, watch how many times I flush the toilet, wash the car, let my lawn dry, all that kind of stuff, when in the face of that, I see development. And I know there's got to be a reason for it. I, in my private life, have assumed, and this is what I'm asking for you to comment on, that probably there's some very serious legal issues involved with the issuance of permits, whether it's for a private residence or a large development, perhaps at a time when these drought circumstances weren't so prevalent. And I'm assuming that the entities, the various governmental entities, be it city or county or state or even federal, have the authority to do something about that issuance of building permits in the face of drought, even though somebody was given the right to do something 4 or 5 years ago, before the circumstances that we have today are here. So that's what I'm asking you guys, just to tell me. I'd like to know. That's the end of my statement.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate your concern. I believe that later in the agenda, Mr. Hagemark's going to be talking about the Stage 3 drought update, and he might be able to address that for you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I also wanted to, as a follow-up, Mr. Zender, we did get into quite a lengthy discussion on development last meeting, which was on the 15th of September, and that is available online, so you can take a look at that. And we also spoke to council on September 20th in great detail about the development and the challenges and struggles with stopping all development at this time. So there might be some good information there. Wasn't planning on going into significant detail on that today, but I think you'll find a lot of information there, and hopefully that'll be helpful.
All right, great. All right, moving on to number 6, the consent items. We have.
Number 5.
Oh, I'm sorry. Breezed right over that one. Sorry, Councilman Wynn. Yeah, we're going to talk about Water Commission roles and responsibilities, and Councilman White will share a little bit on how we can make this more beneficial for us and the council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can just, having sat in your chair 30 years ago and felt some of the similar frustrations, I appreciate the chance to be able to speak with you folks today. We're lucky to have and not by accident, the ANA team sitting in your chairs. Each one of you brings really special skills and experiences to this job, and yet you have been stuck with not getting information timely sometimes. You're going, why am I not getting the full dose of what's going on? And yet you're asking me to participate. Each one of you, there's decades of experience here and skills, and it's so frustrating. And so the conversation has come around to council and to our attorneys and our water agency, our managers, trying to come to what? Well, how do we tease this apart, and how do we get you to understand, first of all, why this is going on? And I would say the number one term that I would bring to bear is litigation. One of the thing that is just that we end up getting stuck with in so many situations, and we've got this nice list of topics where you can hear it first and where you can't, and most of that, in my view, is based on where the city is. And the gentleman here who brought up the development issue is another one where there is constantly the forces of opposition out there, be it on, and I'm interested to see that water rates didn't get bumped down to the topic of something that the council would hear first. Anyway, and as you know, the Proposition 218 is an example of something that is now on the books that when I was sitting in your chair 30 years ago didn't exist. And we wanted to make water rates a certain way. We made water rates a certain way. And Barry was there at that time. And whereas now it's the topic of many other forces, and not just saying this is a good idea. That's not enough for us to make water rates. So that's one, and the other one is I would say is it's a bit embarrassing for a council member to be hearing about what's going on somewhere. Because it's come through Water Commission, and a council member doesn't know about it. Did you hear that X is happening? Well, no, I didn't. So there's some of that's going on as well, to say, well, council members need to be at least informed of what's going on in this very difficult time prior to when something comes to Water Commission. So in meeting with, we had a meeting with Dave was there, and the mayor, and Mike was there as well, to discuss, well, at least can we frame what topics are appropriate for or can work out to share for Water Commission to then go at first and then bring to council, and vice versa, what do we at least get to hear about. And in order so that you're at least forewarned of how this comes down. So I don't know whether this sheet got circulated amongst the Water Commission, or should I just go down the list, Joshua?
I did not make copies, so I'm having someone make some copies real quick, but you can start going down that list. The copies will be here shortly.
Okay. So in that discussion, here's at least a rundown of topics that where Water Commission would have input first, and then it would go to Council, and then vice versa, things that that Council hears first. Water Commission, first of all, would hear first discussions of water use regulations, budget development, water rates, water and wastewater, and I'm understanding this list is coming to you hot off the press here momentarily. Water wastewater buy-in fees, operational actions being taken to try and prevent water quality issues, water quality problems. The water main program, Gibraltar pass-through, sub-metering and master metering, supplemental water purchases, Kachuma master contract renewal, drought public information management, and recycled water production and plant operations. So, and then items that Council would hear about first and would come back around to you would be the desal status, desal expansion, state water rights order, the biological opinion, and the Kachuma pipeline extension. Items to be directed to Council directly would be the water sales agreement with Montecito Water District, wastewater consent decree, and the drought-related water quality violations. And as I say, that the key to me is litigation. We end up. Whoops, we have a few bits on the next page here. So again, to Council directly. Okay, litigation is the last one. So how do we get the most? And coming back to you, we have an A team here, and we want to address the frustration of you not being able to just drive this bus for us, and yet get out of you the benefits of your vast experience. And so bear with us during this time. You know, the Mark Twain expression that water is for fighting over. We're not done with this by any means. We're just launching into all of this water rights order stuff. It's I hope that we can get through all of that, for example, without litigation. I think that's going to be touch and go, but it's also going to vastly affect our water supply. Kachuma's supply is under attack for a variety of reasons, and obviously Kachuma is the core supply for this city. So whatever happens with Kachuma, we're going to have to respond with all of our other, and this is again, you folks are going to be in on that. We're going to have to respond with conservation and the use of these various other supplies in as smart a way as possible. And so I truly appreciate that you and I know I speak for Council and for our water management staff that we appreciate that you're willing to put in the time on this. It's like having either one hand tied behind your back and one eye shut in doing this work under these circumstances. But to have the best that we can get to do this job is really great. So I want to thank you for that work. And I'll finish off. There's a last bit here which I know you're reading, but I'd like to put it into the record, and that is, where can we get water commission increase water commission effectiveness? And first of all, the liaison shall attend as often as possible. That would be I at this point. A representative from the city attorney's office will be in attendance. I'm not sure we have one. We do have one. There's Ms. Connect is in the back of the room there. The water supply manager will provide a regular briefing to the commission on COMB, CCRB, and CCWA. And I appreciate that we're having staff do that. I'm glad to chime in with since I'm the liaison, I'm the representative on those. Once the hard information is in front of you, then I can comment on and give you my take on things. Each one of those is in, I would say they're mostly, over the years, it's like airline piloting, where it's mostly a snoozer, and then once in a while it's terrifying. And that's, right now we're having, as often as not, of course, we're having some pretty scary stuff happening. Continue monthly briefings with the council liaison and water commission chair, and that is something that Mr. Hagmark and I set up really in the middle of the drought, the second, third year of the drought. We started that going, and I think it's been a useful thing, not only because it tees up the information of what's going on, but there's a chance to brainstorm on what's the next issue to discuss or to try and focus on. And then finally, items covered in drought updates to council will be in accordance with the communication strategy outlined above. Again, always in this context of covering our legal flank. So just to come back around one more time, I can't tell you how important your team is now as we come up against all of our cushions of safety are basically disappearing, and we need to really it's going to be a struggle. And the gentleman who brought up the development issue, also all of these different variables are coming to bear, and let's hopefully get through this the drought sensibly and with as little pain as possible. And it's obviously a difficult time, and obviously we're all praying for rain. So again, thank you for your service and for your insights. And obviously, I appreciate any questions you might have of me.
Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank you for pulling that meeting together. I think it was quite helpful. And the outline that's come out of that is, again, hopefully going to accomplish all the goals that you set out to do. I think that's really good. And I also like the idea that we're going to have an item later on our agenda to move the meeting to 9 o'clock, which could help attendance in that regard also. So I hope people support that, because I think that is related to getting everybody here on the same page. I like the idea of you commenting as a liaison to have your opinions on those regional issues. I think that's very important. There's two things that we didn't talk about that's really not related to that communication, but came out of the discussion, and that is the Water Commission recommendations being passed on to council. A lot of times we get the staff report on a Thursday, and it's going to council on Tuesday, which I know, talking to other commission members, there's some at least concern that in fact things are baked and they're just moving through us in that regard. I would really like to see at the end of a council agenda report just a section which is Water Commission, which shows our recommendations or actions on the items, so that when it gets up to council, that information is passed on to them as to what our discussion might be in any recommendation or actions that we had. I think it's pretty simple at the end of the CAR simply to have a section Water Commission, and then to that point say the Water Commission reviewed this on such and such a date, as you do sometimes, and took the following action. Or if we have comments, that those comments get passed on to council. So I think that would help on all these types of items. So again, I just want to thank you for basically outlining the information there, and I think I know, speaking for myself and hopefully Mike, I think he agrees, we thought that was a productive communication, and thank you for doing that.
I don't understand the logic of the items that are going to Water Commission after written briefing sent to council, particularly with regard to desal status and desal, the expansion not so much, but the desal status is a very crucial issue, and I don't know why we would be second in line to see that. Also, one thing about this interesting handout is I don't see the name Harwood White on it anywhere. So that could be added in since this is coming from Harwood White.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could comment just briefly. I asked that question in our meeting. Actually, it's not. I asked the same question, and the comment was, when items are coming to us and council wants to know what's happening, staff is going to send them a memo basically saying this is going to the Water Commission. Be sure you basically, here's the information which is going to the commission. So all it really, at least as I understood, what it says, and it says after written briefing, it just meant that if it's on our agenda, council's going to get a special memo from council or from staff briefing them ahead of time as to what's going on and what's coming before us, so that they, if asked in public, knows what's coming down.
Right.
Is that your understanding?
Exactly. Well, there have been a couple of instances where you folks have received some information ahead of us that, and then a council member is out in the public and they say, well, did you know that the desal plant is X? You know, either that the price has gone up or some change has occurred, and I hear that that's happened. And the council member goes, really? And so instead of the council member going, really? They're going, yeah, I know, because I've at least received the same information that the commission has received in a timely fashion. It's just keeping, we're not allowed to discuss it until we get to a public hearing, but at least we're getting the hardcore information of this is the fact. And Joshua, certainly correct me if I'm wandering from that. But that's my understanding, is at least we're the factual information is being distributed at the same time or at roughly the same time.
That's true.
Just to follow up, another factor, of course, is that we meet once a month and the council meets every week. So it seemed logical that if things come up suddenly and it's 3 more weeks before our Water Commission meeting, that the council should be advised of them. So I think logically there could be very many exceptions to the things that we would get first.
Yeah, but my only comment, maybe, again, if I had to write this over, it would not after written, it would with concurrent written briefing sent to council.
Okay.
That's really what was intended, I think. It was just a concurrent briefing to council, so the information's coming out to everybody at the same time.
Right. We really do need to be up to speed with the facts, and obviously right now it's each piece of this puzzle is on a critical path, and we're all getting the similar questions, and council needs to be as up to speed as possible. And we're not allowed to understand that you're well aware that we don't just, on a given Tuesday, we can't just have a conversation necessarily. We have to, it's a noticed, if there's a full discussion, it needs to be a noticed item. And that takes planning and getting it together.
Mr. Chair, I think just to kind of add, I think this is just one of the challenges that comes about in an emergency when we do have a lot of information and trying to keep everybody informed and things changing quickly. I mean, that's been one of the challenges is, when we get done with our council report, basically our next council report for a drought update is due. It's a 3 to 4 week period to get to council. That's what it takes to kind of going through our internal process. And so over that 3 to 4 weeks, we find that the information changes quickly. And so it's taken a lot internally, even working with our attorney's office to kind of work out the process that these things are, changing literally day to day as we work through these problems. And so trying to make sure that we're providing the most accurate and up-to-date information and keeping everybody on the same page I think it's just a sign of the times that we're in right now, and an effort here to try and lay the ground rules and not, and respect. I think the council wants to respect the role that Water Commission was established for. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, and maybe on that note too, if we get our agenda ahead of time to review before the meeting, if things do change before the actual date of the Water Commission meeting, it would be good to just get a little email or something that says, oh, this action item has changed, or this item has changed on the agenda. But I appreciate the rundown, and hopefully this will get us the information we need and, be able to help you guys and the council make decisions and move forward as we, as you mentioned, are in this unprecedented time of drought. So.
Well, and if I may, Mr. Chair, I think that the another ingredient here, which hopefully can reduce the frustration, at least of the interaction amongst us, is these various communications. The communication that the chair and vice chair have with me once a month. Isn't a noticed public hearing and all that kind of stuff. And I can tell you also that my door is always open, and my cell number is 452-4132. If you want to call me with just something you see that's sticking in your craw, the nimbleness is really important, as you well know right now, as we get to this edge of running everything full tilt. I want to hear every nuance of what you see as opportunities and concerns going forward. So, thank you for your work.
Sure. Just one. It's relatively just a clarification on the monthly briefings. Previously, when we met, the vice chair was going to simply be invited. Now it's at the discretion. There's a change there. I was just curious as to why that happened.
Say that again.
Okay. On the monthly briefings, when we met previously as a group, that was simply going to be that the vice chair and the chair would meet. And now it basically, the vice chair is at the discretion. Again, it's arbitrary whether that happens or not. And that was a change from what we had talked about. So I was curious whether that happened. I think it's a good idea to have both there, not just since I'm vice chair, but because of what you talked about here, both in terms of internal communication as well as succession planning. It would be really helpful, because otherwise you step up to chair and you've not been part of those discussions.
Good point.
Having that is really, really, I think, a really nice training ground.
Good point.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think that's a good idea to have the chair and the vice chair there.
Let's just have a standing invitation then.
Yeah. Okay. Any further comment on this? Appreciate the update, and we'll move forward in that manner. All right. Number 6, consent items. We have 4 items on the agenda. We have meeting minutes. We have contracts for water rates and capacity buy-in fee study. We have ordinance for updates to the water metering requirements, and contract for the design of the Cater plant valve and actuator replacement project. Are there any comments or questions on this before we move to?
Mr. Chair, I actually have some simple questions on items B, C, and D.
Okay, we'll go through them one by one. Then we'll start with B, the contracts for water rates.
Okay, my question on that particular item is, are there particular goals for the study, and specifically the change from the volumetric to fixed? Or is one of the goals of this particular study actually to solve that problem and to make a change in that regard?
No, Mr. Commissioner, that there is no plans to change that aspect of our rate structure. No.
And then I'm sorry, next.
Sorry, I had a question on 6B also. There was something in the council agenda report that talked about a conservation range up to 50% and looking at rates based on that.
So, Mr. Chair, what we want to do during this rate study is kind of establish more of a range so that we have some more discretion. We actually would like to, if possible, adopt potentially multiple years, maybe a 2 to 3 year rate study, so that we can actually look at a bigger picture of what's going on, and we can also adjust. Say, for example, we need to increase our conservation goal. We would have a rate structure that's already been established and noticed that we could more quickly move to if things were to continue to worsen.
Okay. I was thinking it might be good, too, to have that information just in case we do. I know we're moving to the 40% conservation. Mm-hmm. If we do go beyond that, I think it's going to be difficult, but if we do go beyond that, at least we'll know what kind of impacts it has on rates.
Right.
Okay. Questions on item 6C?
Mr. Chair, page 2 of the staff report, section in the summary there, section 1408170. It talks about that it's separate metering for new residential dwelling units as well as non-residential. It's actually, when you go to the actual ordinance, it's only non-residential. There's nothing to do with residential. So I think that's just a problem in the drafting of the report. It actually basically says non-residential uses each lot shall be served by one or more meters as well as condos. It has nothing to do with residential. So the summary there simply needs to be amended to reflect what it actually is, unless I read something wrong, but that's the way I see it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dana Hoffenberg. I'm a water resources specialist under Kelly Dyer. So it's actually earlier in the ordinance. It speaks to new dwelling units must have their own separate meters. I can find the section for
I got
you.
that. That's a different section. I'm just talking about in 1408170, when I look at it again on page 6 of the ordinance.
Okay, so you're just speaking that the portion where it says the resident, that section specifically just speaks to non-residential condominium units?
And then
okay.
the summary basically is the thing with residential units is in another section.
Okay, I understand.
The thing is that section is the summary is not right.
Okay, we'll fix that. Thank you.
That's minor. Thank you.
Is there additional information in each of these sections, or is this the entirety of those sections? Like the information that's in here, is this just the changes, or is this the complete?
Those are the entirety of the sections, okay, along with the changes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I don't have any further comments on that. So we move on to consent item 6D, contract for the design of the Cater plant valve.
This is a more general question, and it actually applies to this one as well as 7A. And it's just for my information more than anything. What is our procurement procedure relative to sole source? Because I never see anything relative to how do we get to selecting Carollo or anybody else. Again, just as background, how do we get to essentially the sole source selection?
Good morning. I'm Kathy Taylor. I'm the city's water system manager. And actually, I'm working on a council agenda report where we went through a sole source selection for this item, and it'll be going to council in early November. And what we did, we worked with a consultant firm, Pacific Rim, and they set up a criteria for how to judge the different actuator processes, the different actuators. And they started out with a handful and they got down to 3. And the criteria they chose for, the open architecture of the software, the ease of integration with the existing Cater plants, the vendor support, they looked at the warranty, and of course they looked at cost. And again, in early November, I'll be going to council with a sole source for the UMA valve actuators that we're hoping that will be used in this project.
My question was a little more general than just that particular item, and it really was on. We have a lot of items, big ticket items, but they're basically going up there with a record. I'm more curious as to what the city's procurement procedure is in going out and actually getting basically the engineering work done.
I think he wants to know what the RFP process is.
The RFP, I'm sorry. The RFP process for selecting the consultant?
Yeah, in each of these cases, yes, in terms of each of these items, basically, if you've gone through, I don't see anything that says you've gone through an RFP process. How did you get to the selection of that particular engineering firm?
For the Corolla, I have so many contracts right now, I'm trying to think straight here.
Corolla was selected based on their work.
Yeah, Corolla was selected based on their work. So Corolla has, previously we have selected Corolla to work at the Gator Water Treatment Plant in a competitive RFP process. They've
That's what I was asking.
Okay,
How did you get to the sole source?
They've done many projects for the city. They were selected through an RFP process early in 2002 for the Gator, the initial Gator expansion project, and then later on we did a $20 million ozone project, the ozonation project, which they were again selected through a competitive RFP process. And this feathers in quite nicely with those upgrades, and so they're best suited because of their knowledge and previous work on those.
Thank you. That's exactly the answer that I was looking
sorry.
for. No, it's okay. And the reason I ask it is because if I'm the public and I'm looking at we're going $100,000, $200,000 contract, and there's nothing in here which says, in fact, we're selecting these people because there had been a previous process. It'd be nice to have just a line to say that.
Your point is well made. Thank you.
It would really help in public information.
Commissioner Davis, I actually think you're missing a page in your, just looking at what's in my packet. There is a page 2 of 3 that actually goes through the selection process for the consultant.
Yeah, my packet 2 is missing page 2 as well.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my comments.
That was why I asked the question, because I didn't see that. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to answer that.
Okay, yeah, I was missing that as well because it talked about optional tasks, and I didn't have that.
The report itself says that Corolla is proposed for this work. They were the engineers of record for the advanced treatment project, which integrated the ozone and solids handling into the treatment process. In the past, Corolla has been selected via a request for proposals for other Gator improvement projects. So,
Yeah, no, we're missing that page. In our
yeah,
file.
I too had a moment of panic about 3 minutes ago when I realized I only had was missing that page.
Okay, so that does it for the consent items. We will,
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second?
I will say with the recommendations or the changes that were made, I will add to that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes unanimously with the 3 we have here. Okay, we'll move on to item number 7, administrative items. We'll start with the contract for the design of the El Cielo Pump Station Rehabilitation Project. Ms. Taylor.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I first want to give a little background about our pump stations. The city has 12 pump stations, and many of them are located at our reservoir sites. And the naming convention we use is we name a pump station for where it pumps to. So in this case, the El Cielo Pump Station is located at the Sheffield Reservoir site, yet it pumps water up to Sheffield Reservoir. El Cielo Reservoir. And at El Cielo Reservoir, we have the Schofield Pump Station, which pumps up to the Schofield Reservoir. The current pump station was built originally in 1982. It's 34 years old, and it is nearing the end of its useful life. Currently, the communications and electrical equipment, we can no longer get replacements for it. The pumps and motors and piping needs to be replaced. And originally, the pump station was designed to work with the original Sheffield Reservoir, which was 45 million gallons, and it was essentially an 8.3-acre lake. So with this project, which is a contract for design of the El Cielo Pump Station Rehabilitation Project, we're asking that Council authorize the Public Works Director to execute a city professional services contract with Carollo Engineers in the amount of $204,301 for the design services of the LC Little Pump Station rehabilitation, and authorize the Public Works Director to approve expenditures up to $20,430 for extra services of Carollo that may result. And under this scope of work, Carollo will be designing the rehabilitation of the pump station. That'll include the pumps and motors and the associated piping. They'll be looking at the communications, and they'll be also looking at some improvements for the building itself. The roof needs replacing. So that is what I'm here to present for your recommendation to move on to council.
Questions?
As a point of clarity, you said, if I heard correctly, we have 10 pump stations,
12.
12 pump stations. Now, those are for potable water. We also have some pump stations for wastewater, I believe. Are they all simply called pump station, or is there a name differential?
The naming differential, thank you very much, is a pump station for our potable water, and we call lift stations for our wastewater.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
No, just the only comment I had, you talked about public outreach, and in this case, it appears there's no change to the facilities outside, and you're just replacing the roof as is. So is there, what is the change that the public would be concerned about?
Well, that is a very sensitive neighborhood. You know, since we did replace the reservoir, that reservoir was actually done with an ad hoc committee that was made up of some of the neighbors. The neighbors there are very engaged and very interested, and so we like to keep them informed of what's going on. It's just part of our good neighborly relations.
Great, thank you. Good job.
Okay. My only comment was I was looking at the design fee compared to the construction cost, and it's about 20% or so of the construction cost. I don't know the full extent of the scope, but I just want to make sure that we're in line with kind of standard, or design fees usually run in the 10% range for certain projects. So
Yeah, we are aware of that. We've spoken to Carollo about it. They're considering possibly having to do a surge analysis there, and we don't think that we will have to do that, considering the pump station has been there for 34 years and we haven't had surge problems in the past. So we don't anticipate using all of that.
okay. All right. Then I will. I guess
I'll move. We recommend this to council.
Okay.
Second.
First, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So moved.
Thank you.
Okay. We will move on to item 7B, the Stage 3 drought update. Mr. Hagemark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Let me get that. Which one is it? This one? Perfect. All right. So the intent of today's drought update is to kind of continue the discussion that we kicked off last month, which was addressing the projected shortage that we see for late next summer. And so I'm going to give a little history on, or I guess some information on where we are with our supplies. And I also have on hand someone here from the Parks Department to talk about tree watering, because that's going to be an important aspect of our outreach if we're going to be asking the community to stop watering their lawns. And then also a big component of that is the public outreach element, and then the financial impacts related to this. I've shown this graphic several times. Basically, not much has changed, and Santa Barbara County is truly the heart of the current drought crisis in California. Looking ahead at NOAA's predictions, they're showing we're right on the edge of predicting below average rainfall, but in essence, what I'm understanding is basically equal chances. They have no idea. They have no idea whether we're going to get rainfall out of this year, significant rainfall out of this year or not. And so for this reason, and based on their projections even last year, we're going ahead and just moving forward with plans as though it is going to continue to stay dry.
If I could just briefly comment, there's a very interesting article in the recent Scientific American by an official regarding the predictions of El Nino last year, and her conclusion was about what you said. They don't know. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah. I think they'd like to know, and they have their models are cranking away, but I think the changes that are occurring in the climate are making it very difficult for any of the models that they've had to really be able to predict accurately. It very well could be the wettest year on record. We have no idea. So anyway, I think for prudent planning, we're going just assuming it's going to stay just as dry as it's been. And I think that's what's leading us to our conclusions today, where we'll be talking about increasing our conservation target. So September was a good conservation month for our community. Racked up 41% conservation in September, which is fantastic. Again, this is, if there's a silver lining to this drought, it has been the community's response. And it's fantastic. As I like to, when I talk about it, this community went into the drought a very lean, water-using community. And so to be able to cut 41% is pretty significant. And in fact, we are right now down to the level of where we were back in the 90s when we had stopped all development and really crimped down on all outdoor watering. And we're at that threshold now, even with the modest increases in population and a booming tourist economy. So I think there's a lot to be said about the changes this community has gone through, and it pains me that we have to ask for more, but this drought continues to just break all records. This is something I want us to stay focused on. Our 12-month running average, what we're going to see, I'm going to start talking more in those terms on a monthly basis, is 35% conservation. We do see typically in the winter months, there's less outdoor water use, less discretionary water use. It's really difficult to hit that 35%. And so we're seeing something less than 30. And then what we're seeing in the summer tends to be 38, 40% conservation. With the discussion today, what we're talking about is moving that 12-month running average to 40%. That's our goal. And so what that's going to look like is in the winter months, hitting 30, 35% would be what we'd expect. But what that means is in the summer, we're hitting probably close to 50% conservation. And so I'd appreciate any feedback on how we message that. But in the end, for simplicity, we're looking for our 12-month running average to be 40%. So our supplies are going to go down through, starting with Lake Cachuma, which is currently at 7.3% of capacity. The city's carryover water, this is water that we've been able to hold and carry forward because of the conservation of our community. This has really been water we've been able to save, but that remaining water will be gone by December. And I think that's kind of a pretty major milestone. We've never not had any entitlement or carryover in Cachuma. So we are, again, another milestone that, not a favorable milestone, but nonetheless a very significant one. A reminder that Lake Cachuma is critical to storage and conveyance, in particular of our imported water. Later on in my manager's report, we'll talk about how we are building up that supply right now. We are importing water every day into Cachuma and building those banks up. Our goal is to build up sufficient bank by early next summer to allow us to meet all of those peaking demands in the community that come up in the summer. We're still waiting on confirmation of the new evaporation formula. I raise this issue because I am getting concerned. Right now it's sitting on the desk of the County Water Agency. We've been asking for confirmation. that the new rules, which would be that the evaporation on the lake would be spread equally amongst the remaining water in the lake, has still not been confirmed. And it would be a significant game changer if that were to fall through, because right now, the way that the formula is set up with carryover water, which would be gone, all the evaporation for the entire lake, that evaporation from the minimum pool, evaporation from the downstream users' accounts, would all come out of our imported water deliveries. And in essence, would basically decimate those deliveries to the lake. And so we need to get confirmation that that evap formula is going to go into effect. What's on the table is for it to take effect January 1st. And I'm hoping this week or next, the county water agency will forward that request onto the Bureau.
So what is the evaporate? How much? This has been confusing to me. How much evaporation is actually happening on the? What's the physical evaporation? Not our calculations and apportionments, but just how much water is evaporating, let's say in the month of October, out of Cachuma at this point, and then how much is our inflow of importation?
That's an absolutely great question. I don't have that offhand. I certainly can get that to you. Do you? Yeah. So what Ms. Dyer was saying is we've lost about 150 to 200 acre feet a month from our supplies in Cachuma for September. So, and we're able to deliver, about 280 acre feet a month is what we're able to deliver. So half of it is gone in September, and that those evaps go up significantly more in the summer. And so, yes, it would erode most of those deliveries to the lake.
I thought we didn't lose our evap on state water.
That is correct. If we pass the water through and use it within 30 days, there is no evap on it. But what we're talking in order to meet next summer's demands is we need to actually stockpile water in the lake. So, yes, you are correct.
Just to throw in a slight technical wrinkle, evaporation is measured by pan evaporimeters, and that's where you get the number that's cited as actual evaporation. It's just about impossible to really measure evaporation in a body of water like the lake itself. So what they're doing is interpreting pan evaporimeter data to the size of the lake.
Commissioner Keller, thank you for adding that, because it is challenging, and in particular, they may have calibrated it when the lake is full, but as you get down to these low levels, it's difficult at best to actually understand how it's going to affect, particularly given you have sundowners, you have these windy days. That certainly accelerates evaporation as well.
And I would say you have a smaller surface too.
Which should help, in theory.
Yeah. Is that taken into account, or is that?
It does. It does. It is based on the surface of the remaining lake.
Okay.
Yes. So if there's a silver lining to a very small lake is the surface area is less. The challenge with that, though, the counterpoint to that is when you have a smaller lake, it warms up faster, and it accelerates evap as well. So we have kicked off work to develop a project to extend the state water pipeline from the dam to where the barge is currently. It's about a 2-mile, 10,000 linear foot extension that would need to be done. I appreciate the leadership we've had at CCWA. Councilmember White was there to push forward with that. We are a ways off. We don't anticipate needing it until the spring of 2018. But we have no room for failure, and so being able to kick off and have that discussion, make sure we get all of our permits in place, and most importantly, get the county on board. The county has been rather resistant to putting this in for various reasons, They have an emphasis on wanting to make sure that there's still recreation that occurs in the lake. And so if we have to pass water through the lake, it helps out with their recreational goals. So I think starting this discussion early is a fantastic idea.
Any question on that? Are we getting the other water agencies involved in this? Or?
Absolutely. It is being paid for through CCWA, which we have all of us participating in, including La Cumbre and some of these smaller water agencies that are involved. So the cost will be shared, yes.
And this will be a permanent pipeline installation or temporary, or is that still undetermined?
Undetermined at this point. I think it would be nice to probably put something in permanent. The problem is it really changes the permitting process. Temporary can probably be permitted fairly quickly. And so those are all things that are being discussed as part of this design. Mm-hmm. It's just an updated graphic showing the lake elevation or lake storage. We are at the black line here, and for those who aren't familiar with this, the green line was the lake elevation during the last drought, and in which we received in year 5. We received the miracle month of March, and we missed that one this time around. I have a video for you that we just recently completed. Is it this? So what we're seeing here, this is the State Water Project dumping into Kachuma. This has been noted as the highest waterfall in Santa Barbara County right now. But this little pipeline right here is our lifeline to being able to move imported water into the lake. And you can see just how far down the water level is. You can see these islands. This is just right in front of the dam, these islands that are starting to show up. Certainly, we saw here, this is an old dairy that used to be here and was removed before the lake was filled. Notably, all the bathtub rings. The lake is approximately 100 feet down from its capacity. This is pretty dramatic. So this is the boat launch, the main boat launch. And what you'll notice here is just the time it takes to get to the water. It just keeps going and going. And then you can see this little goat path right here that kind of gets down to one of the docks that's remaining. But you can kind of make out the basic river bottom that used to be here. But just, this is the barge. It's currently our lifeline to keep state water and our remaining carryover water moving to the south coast. This little passage here is here so boats can actually go around the barge. There is a backup generator. This facility just can't go down at this point. This right here, this little pocket of water, is where the barge was just in June. Just seems like just a few months ago. We had dug out a hole so that it could be there for a little bit longer time, but we moved it just in time before the downstream release began. And as you can see, our pipeline now just rests here. We get up here a little further, you'll see these piles. This pipeline used to be tethered right at the very top of this pipe of these piles. Some of these are really tall. And then here is the north portal intake to the Tecolote Tunnel. It's a little over 100 feet tall, and just kind of gives you a sense that, the system was designed around gravity. We used to be able to gravity feed from here to the city or for the south coast, which is very energy efficient. Unfortunately, in times like this, we do have to pump water from the lake. But, 99% of the time, we're able to gravity feed. But certainly gives you an idea of just how low the reservoir is. This area has been deemed Kachuma Meadows at this point. You can't really even see the lake from 154, so we felt like we really needed to bring some of this footage back to our meetings so that people could just see how bad it really is. So just a quick little update on the state water rights order. Just a reminder, it did come out on September 9th. The state water rights hearings were held back in 2003. And so it's finally the state getting around to actually issuing their order. Unfortunately, their order was kind of a hybrid of some of the options that were put out there. It wasn't necessarily what we had hoped for. And so we are feverishly looking to model and understand what the state's decision means for our water supplies. It certainly is not a good thing. And we are also studying and bringing back some information to understand the impacts that the invasive species have on steelhead, because we do believe that's playing a significant role in keeping our current program from being successful. CCRB is made up of Montecito Water District, Goleta Water District, and the city, and is committed to protecting our primary water supply throughout the region for coastal agriculture and, of course, for the environmental priorities it represents. We were granted a 45-day extension from the state, so our comments now are due on December 9th. I'm not sure at this time whether we'll have an opportunity to bring this back to Water Commission or Council prior to these comments being due, but I know if we have an opportunity, we will. I think we're going to be working right up to that December 9th deadline to get all of our information in. So a little recap on our imported water. We were very successful this year. We were able to secure a little over 7,000 acre-feet of water. This water is basically available in storage in San Luis Reservoir, and we are having it delivered as we speak, but there are limitations to that. We are planning for next year, given the reservoir elevations right now, that we will see at least a 35% allocation. We think that's a prudent target, at least at this time, and which means that we will be looking for very minimal supplemental water for this coming year. If I had to guess right now, I think it was somewhere in the 1,000 acre-foot range, maybe even less, because we do have so much water in storage already that will get us into 2019. CCWA is the one who oversees all of our imported water deliveries, and they have been working to maximize those deliveries. We really appreciate their efforts to do that. They've been looking at various different options, configurations, so that we can maximize our deliveries to the lake. We hope that we'll be able to deliver more than 3,300, but all of our planning is around our maximum capacity in the pipeline, which is that. So we anticipate all other agencies, given the current drought situation, to be maximizing their deliveries. Based on that delivery to the lake, we have sufficient water to keep that pipeline full through 2019, or into 2019, I should say. Gibraltar storage is at 10%, and as we've talked about the water quality challenges with that remaining water, we are anticipating, we're getting more and more information back about the repercussions of the Ray fire. We are anticipating higher runoffs as a result of the burned watershed. It's kind of a good and bad because of the scorched watershed. Their vegetation isn't there. Typically, it has been taking somewhere around 12 inches of rain before we actually see any meaningful runoff into Gibraltar. The upside to this would be hopefully something less than 12 inches will start yielding some runoff. The challenges with that, it will be laden with silt, which will be a water quality challenge that we're going to be struggling with if we're going to be using that water. The Bear report is estimating that we could see about 500 acre-feet of debris coming into Gibraltar. further diminishing our current capacity, which is just under 6,000 acre-feet. Groundwater wells. We currently have all eight groundwater wells in production. We've been looking at our USGS groundwater model, and currently we're projecting that the basin is at 30% capacity in storage unit 1, and we have somewhere around 3,000 acre-feet of remaining water, usable water in that basin. We're currently extracting about 2,000 acre-feet a year, so it's going quickly. We expect that to slow down, and we are planning on that in our long-range planning. Based on the model, we have extracted sufficient water from the basin that we should expect seawater intrusion, and so we have increased our monitoring to monthly, and we've added some additional locations to make sure we've got a good grasp of where the front is on that seawater intrusion.
Does the city actually do the monitoring of the water quality in those wells, looking for seawater intrusion?
We have been paying USGS to do it, but we are contemplating us taking the samples to save some money.
Thank you.
In the Foothill Basin, it is currently at 35% of capacity, 35% remaining capacity, with a remaining yield of about 2,000 acre-feet, and we're currently extracting about 1,000 acre-feet a year from that basin. So both basins are basically approaching their historic lows. We believe our supply planning has taken into consideration what's remaining, but we do note as we get out into 2019 that these supplies are the groundwater supply is going to be significantly diminished. Desal project offshore, we got some action coming up here. The barge will be leaving Long Beach on October 25th. It'll be loaded with the pumps and the screens and all the piping to complete the intake work. It's intended to arrive in Santa Barbara on the 28th. This barge is going to have a significant crane to be able to set some of these pieces in place, in particular the screen structures. These massive concrete structures that are going to bolt on to the existing pads that are out there. And this work should be complete by mid-December. And this is going to be one that we'll be following very closely, and we'll be able to give a status update to the Water Commission in November when we come back. But what we've been talking with the contractor about doing is increasing their staffing, so they're going to be working 2 dive shifts a day out there, so basically 16 hours a day, having divers down there to be able to expedite that work, because getting that seawater onshore kicks off the next phase, which is maturing the media. Filter media requires biological growth on it in order to maximize its ability to filter the water, and so based on that current timing, and we're still working with the contractor on this, is that the late January 2017 is probably going to be delayed. We don't yet have a good feel, probably a few weeks at this point, but we hope to have something from them that we feel more confident about here shortly. But the ocean work is one of those big unknowns. We certainly could get storms that come in, and that would basically could stop work, and potentially loss of visibility, which would halter and slow down work as well. And so some of those are some of the vulnerabilities that we're facing related to the offshore work. And then once we start that maturing of the filter media, we believe it's a 42-day process, but it is a biological activity that we're trying to grow, and there is some plus or minuses to that, and so that's kind of driving it. We are meeting weekly right now with the Department of Drinking Water, so that we're all on the same page when it comes to the startup of this facility. They've providing them opportunities to go through the facility for us to test it. ahead of schedule. And so when we do the startup, hopefully this goes as seamlessly as possible. I did want to recap. There's been a lot of discussion in the public about, hey, what about renewable energy for desal? We are still working on that. Certainly, it's kind of taken a back burner to some of our urgent emergency stuff, but this still is important. And so we will be lining up our energy manager to actually come speak to Water Commission and Council and provide an update on where we are. He is still following community choice aggregation as probably the single most significant solution to addressing the electrical demands of the facility. But he is also looking to expand the cogen production and by increasing methane from our digesters, and there's a few different concepts there. Discussion about energy offset credits potentially. Solar PV sites, El Estero and the desal plant aren't ideal locations for really putting solar, but we do have some great reservoirs that would be. And so bringing back more information about that. And then also battery storage, being able to bank some of that energy and use it during that peak 5 to 8 p.m. at night, which is really what drives a lot of our peak water rates. It's based on your peaking needs. And so if we can shave off that 5 to 8 p.m. usage, it could make a big difference in our ongoing power costs.
Yeah.
Are we talking about generating electricity to directly use at city facilities, or putting electricity into the grid, Edison's grid, and getting credit for it?
It's mainly to use it at city facilities. And that's the challenge right now, and nobody knows better than Commissioner Davis over there. But, putting in solar PV at our reservoirs, we don't really have any significant electrical demand at some of our reservoirs, and so we would need to wheel it through SCE's system to get it to the desal plant or to El Estero or to Cater. And so still trying to push the PUC to make that more of a reality. Commissioner Davis, have anything to add to that? No.
No, it may take legislation actually to get that done. Each year there is a bill moving through that will allow essentially that to happen, to have the generation off-site and the credits for it. And it's gotten very close each year, so maybe this will be the year.
Yes. So current water supply strategy, I'm going to go start with our monthly supply mix. And this is based on the current target of 35% conservation. And here's where we are noting the shortage now. So this is our mix of supplies in each month going out. We're currently in October. You'll notice we're finishing up the remaining carryover water in the lake. I don't know if I mentioned, but part of finishing up that carryover is moving to this new evaporation formula. It's a criteria. The county said you need to use all of your carryover water before we'll contemplate moving to this evap formula. We'll jump through the hoop. So we are looking to get that water out of there so that we can move to that new formula in January. But as we move through the months of 2017, what we are focused on right now is this August, September, October timeframe, where under the 35% conservation, we have a recognized shortage. It adds up to be about 300 acre-feet. Here's what our supplies in Kachuma currently are projected to look like, and here's kind of the scary part. In the January, February timeframe, where our supplies in Kachuma are expected to be near zero. And so what you're seeing happening in this timeframe is not rainfall. It's not what we're predicting here. This is the buildup of storage from imported water. We need this to actually be up here in the 700 acre-foot range so that we can meet these peaking demands we're expecting for next summer. Keeping in mind, there really isn't a lot of contingency with this. So our water supply strategy, we're currently in year 6 as of October 1st, and we do believe we have enough water on hand. It's a matter of when that water is available, going back to that conveyance capacity limitation. And so if we move this community to a 40% conservation target, we believe we will have adequate water to meet all needs going through next summer and allow us to build up a contingency of about 500 acre feet should we have any interruptions in our imported water deliveries, should we have an excessive number of wells go down or desal get delayed significantly. So what we're recommending or proposing to get there is to move the community towards a ban of watering turf. The goal is to protect the community's investment in trees and shrubs. We really want to help the community prioritize what we believe the water should be used for. We do believe there's adequate water to water our trees. But at this time, we do not believe we should be spending water on turf or lawns. We believe by targeting turf grass, we can minimize the economic impacts to the community, and we believe it can quickly generate the savings that we're looking for. Staff has gone through and estimated the savings to be somewhere between 500 and 1,200 acre feet. It is a difficult number to estimate because a lot of people have already let their turf grass go. And then there's always the other side of the how many people will comply with this regulation. We will not be going through people's backyards. We will not be using drones to look for violations. This will be, we are recommending, will be based on a complaint-driven enforcement, which is what we do now. When we get complaints, we go out and investigate, and 99% of the time, I'd say 100% of the time right now, that communication, that education resolves the matter. We have not had anybody receive a violation in the form of a $250 fine. One of the other things that we're also recommending as part of this change is also a requirement that all construction activity use recycled water. Now that our facility is up and running, and given our potable water supply conditions, that any need for dust control or soil compaction should be using our recycled water. We did confirm, aside from a very small area up above Sheffield, that every site within the city is within a mile of a fill station on the recycled water system. So we believe that's a reasonable distance to travel to get recycled water. The general ban on turf grass right now will have some exceptions to it. Playing fields at schools and child care centers that are used for active recreation would be exempt. Recreation areas at publicly owned parks and open spaces, again, we do want to encourage people to continue to use our parks, and we do want to create a safe environment for doing so. Golf course putting greens and trees would be exempt. Tees would be exempt. Watering of certified water-wise grasses. As you may recall, we have been encouraging and even financially supporting the use of some of these native grasses that are out there, such as buffalo grass, which literally need to be watered once a month. We want to continue to provide support to that, and so those types of turf grass would be exempted. And then turf areas directly related to business activities, such as ceremonial areas, would also be eligible for an exemption. They would need to file for a request, and we would be looking for on-site conservation to meet that 40% target. So if they're going to water that lawn, how are they going to meet the 40% conservation overall for the property? There may be areas where they have a wedding venue and it's an important part of their business, and to that extent we can work with them to try and say, okay, what area is really critical to having turf, and how can you make that continue to make the 40% goal. So that's currently what we have out there. In your packet, I have included a copy of the draft resolution. We welcome any feedback the council or the Water Commission has on this. This item is not going to council until November 1st, so we do have time for feedback. I know you just got it in your packet today, so I do apologize, and we welcome that feedback, though, over the next week if you want to go ahead and email me on that.
I'll just say I'm definitely in favor of the proposed draft resolution here. I mean, it makes sense to me and something that we need to do to make sure we meet our goals next summer. I did want to just note that Commissioner Burney, she's not here today, but she did want me to reinforce that she is definitely in favor of this proposal, and she wanted to make sure that we note that those people that are given the exceptions, that they still are required to meet the 40% goal. I know you just mentioned that, but she just wanted to make sure that that was reinforced. So I will do that for her.
Mr. Chair, I'd actually like to make a motion because we had a lot of discussion of this at the last meeting, and I don't know that it actually got passed on to council directly. I'd like to make a motion to support the recommendation on the turf ban with all of the conditions that we've discussed today and we discussed at our last meeting. I'd like that to be on the record, though, as a support from the Water Commission, if I could get a second to that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I understand why that would be different from the recommendation for the entire 7B. However, I'm willing to second the motion, assuming that as far as protocol, that's appropriate. So, seconded.
Mr. Chair, given the importance of this item, I would also, again, extend a welcome to any commissioner who'd like to come speak on November 1st. I think it would help out with the discussion. I think there was a lot of confusion about our last meeting with council. We were really just introducing where we needed to go and looking for a discussion and some direction from them, and we did. It was a very helpful discussion. I just to kind of summarize where it was, I think everyone was on board with the urgency of the current water supply situation. I think the discussion was more around, hey, we've asked our community to conserve, and they've risen to that occasion. Can't we just ask them again without telling them how to use their water? And I completely agree. I wish we didn't have to take the step, but I think so much is at risk that we just don't have the time to spend the next 6 months asking the community and waiting. What I hear often from is the people who are down already to like 3 HCF. They're really low users and saying, what, I don't know what I can do. What do you want me to do? And so I think by going after turf, it really helps hone the message. If you're using 3 HCF, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. We're really going after that next increment to help. Because in particular, for those people who may be using 3 HCF, we may want them to water their trees. And that's kind of the message that I'm hoping comes out of today's discussion, that we think there still is water for the essential outdoor landscaping right now.
I expect there's an effort being made to identify and communicate with the top water users. Can you describe that a little bit and what opportunities there may be to gain more conservation on that end?
Chair, council member, we about 2 years ago we actually sent out a letter to all the top 100 users asking for them to reduce their water usage, and we had great feedback from them on that. And most recently we took a look at our Tier 3 usage. We were curious how much water was still being used in Tier 3. And it ended up being, on average, that is, 40 acre-feet a month is what's being used in Tier 3, which is pretty low. I mean, it totaled up, I think it totaled up to somewhere around 300 acre-feet for the year. A little over 300 acre-feet for the year was Tier 3. And Tier 3 is anything over 16 HCF. And again, that doesn't take into, that could be going to a property that's 2 acres. So that may not be an exorbitant amount of water for a 2-acre parcel with trees. But I think the point that it helped with me is to realize that even if you were to cut out our entire Tier 3 usage and say that that's completely excessive, it would get us about 300 acre-feet of savings for the year. So there isn't a lot of fat left in the current water usage. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 out there, but my point being that we don't have a significant amount of egregious water users right now. The schedule, our recommendation for adoption of the turf grass watering will be focused on December 6th. So we'll be bringing this back, touching base with council on November 1st, and then coming back. We would like to get this implemented by January 1st. So we'll have a grace period, allow us to kind of staff up internally and start getting the information out there. We believe getting started on this early has multiple merits. One of them, winter rainfall, will kind of smooth that tradition. There really shouldn't be any watering of turf grass in the winter anyway, even based on the last few years of rainfall. If we get that, that's enough to keep your grass alive without any watering. So it's an easy ask, we feel, right there. Allows us the opportunity for public outreach and education, because I think that's been a hallmark of our outreach and why we've been so successful. But ultimately, so that we as a community are fully engaged come the start of this spring's irrigation season. It puts the city in the best interest going into best position going into year 6, and if we do get significant rainfall and it drastically improves our water supply situation, we have the ability to pull back if we need to be.
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Keller, who thank you for seconding. I think it's different in that the recommendations in 7B right now are simply to receive the update and work on the CAST report. This was really aimed at the December 1st meeting at council, that there would be an item from the Water Commission in that agenda report showing the Water Commission's position relative to this particular support for this item. So I appreciated that second. That's why I made the motion. So if I could have a vote on the motion.
Thanks. So that means we have a motion before the
Right.
commission right now.
Correct.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do we want to add that to?
And I will try to make the meeting on the 1st.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and be there too for sure.
So to summarize, we did have some changes on the enforcement based on feedback we received from council, and that is that we would remain a complaint-driven, given the successful relationship that we have with the community. I feel confident that without patrolling, we will see considerable response to this. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to be peeking in people's backyards. We're not flying drones. We're not doing any of that stuff. But if a neighbor calls in, hey, I was walking my dog at 5 in the morning and I saw the sprinklers on at so-and-so, we will follow up and, in particular, educate. I've put on here our process. We currently, the first complaint is a courtesy notice. We find that this captures about 95% of people anyway. They're more than happy to comply. The second is a violation, and we do follow up with a door hanger and warning letter. And it's not until we get to the second violation that we actually get the $250 fine. And then it ratchets up from there, leading to ultimately a water shutoff if there isn't any compliance. Public outreach. At this time, I wanted to bring up Mr. Downey. He's going to come up and talk a little bit about what the Parks Department is doing to protect our tree infrastructure.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, my name is Tim Downey. I'm the City Arborist for the City of Santa Barbara. The Parks and Recreation Department actively has worked on a strategic drought action plan when the drought declaration was implemented. And since that time, it is a dynamic plan that we evaluate what our water supply is and make changes as needed based on those deliveries. Part of that plan and an attachment to that plan is a historic and specimen tree drought action plan. It outlines how we're going to treat those trees that have been given that special designation. We'll go into a little more detail a little later. And the plan also, the strategic drought action plan also talks about where we're going to use water, where we're going to cut water, where we're going to do things for safety. So the park and turf irrigation priorities, we have prioritized our turf irrigation because we recognize that there are portions of the turf that we manage that we can let go because water's too important to spend on those sites. But we do prioritize water where there is a sports field or a field being used for sports, and that's because without water the field becomes unserviceable and unsafe to use. And the other area where we continue to water at higher levels than other areas is where we have events such as weddings and city events that occur within our parks and facilities. The problem becomes, okay, we've got all these trees in the middle of the park, and they're important for us to save. An example, my example is, the trees took 50, 60, 70, 80 years to get where they are. The turf has grown all along, but if you stop watering the turf, and I'm going to be very positive here, when we get water, you can throw more seed down and throw water on it, and you get a lawn back in a couple of weeks' time. If you lose the trees, you cannot get that investment back for 60, 70, 80 years. So that's why we feel it's very important, not only for the city, but residents to water their trees. It's a long-term investment that can't be recuperated in a short period of time. So in those parks where there is lawn, we are watering the trees that are in the lawn. We're doing that. In some of the planters, there is irrigation that we can turn on for those that don't hit the turf areas. In some of those, there are not. In those situations, we provide water via hoses, soaker hoses at times. We have a water truck and 2 water trailers that we utilize to supplement that water. So our street trees is where we have really prioritized a lot of our effort watering trees. There's a lot of constraints to providing water, and in my last slide, we'll go into where the appropriate locations are to water trees as a resource to the citizens. But the tree roots for these trees are under the sidewalk. They're under the street. They're under people's private walkways. The problem is, how do we get water to those trees? So it's a really big challenge. So the city is prioritizing. Prior to the drought, we water trees that had been planted until they get established. We had a full-time staff member that's his primary responsibility. Since the drought, we looked at, okay, how are we going to prioritize watering with our resources, and what are we going to do first, and how are we going to expand upon that? So we continue to water those young establishing trees, and the drought is actually having an impact on the length of time it takes for those trees to establish because there's less water beyond what we're able to provide. We are prioritizing historic and specimen trees that are rare in our Orpit Park and Fred Chesapeake Park. There are numerous trees that are the only tree of its species in our inventory. So they're very rare and treasured trees that we're doing our best to try and save. Or trees that are susceptible to the drought. A lot of our trees that are planted here are from different regions of the world that receive much more water than we get here. We're fortunate to be able to grow those trees, but when we're in a drought situation, it impacts them even more. So some of those trees are being targeted for getting extra water. And the other issue is some trees, when they become stressed, are subject to attack by insects or diseases, and we've identified those as being priority trees to receive water as well. As I mentioned before, we deliver water to our street trees primarily through water truck and trailers. Our our historic Dormus stone pines on East Anapamu, we have found a method that has been developed by others to use a traffic barricade, to fill that with water and attach a soaker hose to that to provide slow, deep watering for the stone pines where there's space to do that. Unfortunately, there isn't enough space to do it as well as we'd like, but we're doing the best that we can. In addition to that, we've reached out to the community. For our smaller trees, we've increased our ability to water by placing watering bags on the young trees. And again, in the last slide, I'll discuss why it's important to water in different places for trees. But the watering bags allow us to fill up 20 gallons of water, and it drips down slowly into the soil, and we can fill that bag quicker than we can if we were to probe the soil and provide water in a more manual way. So those irricades, barricades that are used for irrigation, we've termed it irricade, are sources that we supplement our water truck and trailers to increase our ability to water more trees. With the irricades and the water bags, we've done, and our specimen and historic trees, we've done outreach to people to say, hey, you can help. You can throw a little water in this water bag and help this tree survive. We actually have a volunteer that is filling 3 of the irricades on East Anapamu for us on a basis that we work with them on. We have signage on all of our irricades and water bags to say, if you'd like to help, you can give us a call and we'll explain how. So, and then lastly, we went to each of the property owners adjacent to historic and specimen trees, reached out to them, said, these are important trees. We'd like to help you develop a watering schedule, or when it's a public tree, ask you to help supplement that watering when you can do that. So we've personally reached out to those individuals adjacent to all those trees. So as I mentioned, the irricades and the gator bags are sources for us to quickly put water at a location that can be dispersed to trees without the staff member being there the whole time the water is being dispersed. Young trees, we have a bag. The photo on the right is of one of our trees that has a gator bag on it. Gator bag is a name of one of the types of watering bags. So our truck driver can come fill that bag up in a couple minutes' time versus watering for 10 or 15 minutes by probing. The roots of small trees haven't developed yet. So their roots that absorb water and nutrients are pretty close to the trunk. So the watering bags work really well for those. As trees mature, their roots develop farther out away from the trunk of the tree. So the watering bag's no longer useful to them. What we've done on East Anapamu is installed these irricades. You see it in the left photo there. Attached to that, that holds 125 gallons of water. We fill it up once a week. The day before, we open the valve, and it drains out through gravity through soaker hoses that are placed throughout the parkway there. And that's shown because we've covered them with mulch. But that delivers that 125 gallons or close to that, because it doesn't completely drain, but over an 8-hour period, 8 to 10 hour period overnight, and the next morning we fill the irricades up again. We close the valves, fill the irricades up again, so that they're stable and don't get taken away from the location. So this is our tree watering diagram that we've worked with Water Resources to develop, and Madeline's going to go into that in more detail later. But as you can see in this diagram, on a mature tree, the tree roots grow well out beyond where the canopy reaches. The roots that absorb water at the bottom of the diagram it says feeder root area. Those area, the area shown in white there down there is the area in a normal situation where the roots develop, and it's the best place to provide water so that the tree can get the most benefit from that water. So watering the trunk of a big tree doesn't help. Watering too far out doesn't help, but this is the best bang for your buck. The other thing that I wanted to stress here is turf and ground covers, typically their root system only goes down a few inches into the soil. In fact, overhead watering, when you apply overhead water, it also goes only a few inches into the soil. Tree roots, however, develop in the top 3 feet of soil. So they could benefit from water that goes deeper. The key point that deeper watering is better for trees is for 2 reasons. We get more water into the soil if we water deeper, and the ground covers and grasses can't access that water that's down lower, so we don't have as much competition for the available water. So watering overhead provides water in the top couple inches. Yes, trees do get some of that, but they have to compete really hard with the turf grasses for that. Turf grasses' metabolism, for lack of a better term, is much quicker than a large woody plant. So they're going to use more of that water than the tree can, quicker than the tree can. So our recommendation is that continue to water trees. They're a valuable resource. We want to save them, and the city's doing the best that we can to save our trees, and we encourage the public to do the same. But the way the water's delivered it should change so that the trees receive less competition for the available water and more benefit. And with that, I'll hand it off to Madeline.
Chair Kilburn, members of the Water Commission, my name is Madeline Ward. I'm the Water Conservation Supervisor, and I'm pleased to report that we have been working with the Parks and Recreation Department, Forestry Division, and within Public Works Water Resources to develop some new materials related to saving water and saving trees at the same time. This is one of the more common questions and concerns that we get from our community is how to best water their trees, and as the drought continues to worsen, how they can ensure that they are able to save their trees and recognize signs of stress before it gets too far. So we are developing a comprehensive flyer with information on where to water trees, as Mr. Downey just went through, how much to water them, how often, and how to look for signs of stress. We are also going to have much more information available on a web page, including frequently asked questions and more details about specific irrigation methods, similar to what Mr. Downey was explaining. We do have an existing tree care video that's been well received by the public, but we're going to create another more in-depth video that shows different irrigation methods and how they can be applied to small trees as well as larger mature trees. And we are also developing some public workshops to not only put out all of these new materials, but also to do a good question and answer session, because many people have specific tree needs that they want some further help with. And as always, the city is here to help our community save water, whether we're in a drought or not, with a variety of our programs. Our most popular program is our free water checkup program. This is a one-on-one customer service that's really tailored to each customer's property and their concerns. As you can see, the checkups that we are conducting have more than doubled since 2013, before we had the drought declaration in 2014. Another popular program is our landscape rebate program. We've been running this program since 2009. The average water savings per customer is about 19%. So that's for single-family homes, multifamily, and commercial. And it's a it's a customized rebate per property. This can include a rebate on water-wise plants, on irrigation systems, on pressure regulation, on mulch or gray water systems. And this program has also grown substantially with the number of rebates issued per month. Pre-drought declaration, we had an average of 4 per month, and right now we have about 30 per month, so we are very busy. So we're really proud of our programs. We're pleased with the customer response and the community response, and we do hear great feedback each week from customers who want to show their appreciation for our field staff and our phone staff and our great programs. In terms of public outreach support services, as our supply situation has become more challenging, staff has needed additional help with outreach support. We do have a current contract with Katz and Associates to assist with desalination outreach, and we are requesting to amend the contract to include support related to drought and water supply challenges and communicating that to the public. So the scope includes a strategic public outreach plan, educational messaging on our water supply challenges, media relations, and this would be a contract increase of $52,294, which also includes funds for extra services if needed.
So, I don't know if we briefly touched on this last time, but we now have a better feel for the revenue impacts from moving towards a turf grass ban and the 40% conservation. We do anticipate it to be about a $1.6 million revenue loss for FY17. At this time, we are recommending use of reserves to address that. We believe it's although we are currently planning to use $7 million from reserves, given the options of trying to get a drought impact fee in place, we just don't believe there's adequate time to do that, and rates, as you well know, have just gone up on people's bills at this point, and so I think it's appropriate to take a step back and look at addressing this lost revenue as part of the FY18 rates. We will be, as part of the contract for water rate development, we will be exploring the drought impact fee, so we will be bringing that back to Water Commission and Council for more discussion. Rationing. This comes up pretty regularly, discussion of rationing and the role of rationing. To clarify, we do believe it's the option of last resort. Rationing, we've been pulling together information for that, but I think for this community, it would have a significant impact on the outdoor water usage, in particular for the average user. So we believe it's not appropriate yet. However, we believe it's prudent to continue to develop this plan. It is rather comprehensive to the extent that it requires us basically to establish budgets for every single customer in the city. It's fairly time-consuming, and then there's also an appeals element to it. If people violate, there is an opportunity for them to appeal. And, of course, that requires staffing and resources to manage that. Based on our just preliminary look at it, if we were to go to rationing, the average user would likely end up with insufficient water to do much outdoor watering at all, just giving a glimpse into how stringent a rationing plan would need to be. We will continue to develop this, and we hope that we'll have more information for discussion in the spring of 2017. Not that we're anticipating that we would need it in the spring of 2017, but we believe, based on our current timing, that we'll have something for continued discussion on that. And that concludes our presentation, unless there's any questions.
The packet item also had a paragraph about development resources that was not addressed specifically, I don't think, in this presentation right now. And in view of this gentleman's questions, could you briefly describe?
So what we went over was development in general has an impact to the community, but as our community uses about 10,000 acre feet a year, new development is about 27 acre feet in general. Last year it was 6 acre feet is what new development brought on. And so it's a very, very small component. However, it has a significant impact on many people who live and work in the community. And it has been kicked around. I think we've talked about it for the last 3 years, is what to do with development. And at this time, there wasn't an interest in stopping development. Stopping development doesn't do anything for the summer. It's literally something you would do to help save water 2 to 3 years out. Any project that has a permit there'd be many legal issues to stopping that. And so it'd be pretty much anything that has not received a permit for construction. And so given the small amount of water that's involved, it has been pushed out as an option in the future. I think if we were certainly talking about a rationing plan, that would be something to tie it to. But it really is a discussion for the commission and council to kick around. That's where it currently sits.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Obviously, these projects are very visible, as this gentleman noted. Many of the projects also are rebuilding on sites that had previous water use, so they don't represent new water use. In fact, they may represent less water use. Thanks.
My only comment was the fact that the city went through a general planning process. They looked at long-term water demand. And yes, we're in a drought, but the development which is happening is consistent with that long-term water supply. As we go forward the next 5 years, and in fact, the long-term water supply is reanalyzed, we may look at long-term development again at that particular point. But again, I'd reemphasize what you said, that we've looked at it 2 or 3 times. It's about 27 acre feet average. Over the next couple of years, that will not make or break anything which is going on in terms of our water supply budget.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Well, we do have 2 recommendations, A and B, which is on to council, so I'd recommend staff recommendation on A and B.
Just before I have a second on that, do we want to add letter C? I know we already took a vote on informing council.
I think it was a separate motion, which
Separate
actually
motion?
was for
Okay.
the December 1st meeting.
Chair, I think I understand exactly what the commission is looking for, and we'll be
Okay.
adding that to the drought presentation. We'll actually add a comments from Wilk Commission onto the report.
All right, perfect. All right, I have a motion to approve A and B. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, passes. Okay, we will move on to...
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can you, and maybe I'm just teeing up for further staff contribution. Where is staff on the next increment of desal design and construction? Can you describe, as we're talking about running out of water, running low, can you describe what where staff sees that going forward?
Chair, Councilmember White, yes, we are actively working on what would be involved in expansion of the desal plant. In particular, remember one of the major hurdles was conveyance. We believe we have a new option available that could expedite that conveyance project. And we are working on the details with that, and we hope to bring back something soon on that for more information. We're also part of the contract that was approved by Water Commission in July and authorized by Council in August. We are working with Corollo Engineers to put together what amounts to a request for proposals from IDE for various expansion capacities. We're going to be looking at 1250, a single skid. We're looking at 2 skids. We're looking at 3 skids. As you may recall, we do have a pricing to add 3 more skids, but that pricing did expire a year ago, and so refreshing that pricing. And so we are ramping up and want to be ready, should this winter not come through, to at least have a discussion about what those expansion costs are and be ready to move if we need to.
Great, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda, 7C, the comments on the draft report to direct potable reuse. Ms. Dyer.
Mr. Chair, Water Commissioners, Councilmember White, my name is Kelly Dyer. I'm the Water Supply Manager, and I'm here to give a brief update on where the state is with evaluating the feasibility of direct potable reuse regulations. And I wanted to first say that the city for the last year or so has been working really hard to evaluate the technical feasibility of potable reuse, both indirect and direct. The state currently only has regulations for indirect. I'll explain the difference between the two in my presentation. But what I'm here today is to give a quick update on where the state is with the direct potable reuse, which regulations do not currently exist, but the state has been looking into whether they could in the future. So first I'll give some background recommendations on the state's draft report on feasibility of regulations that was just recently released, describe general city comments and implications for city planning should the city move forward with a potable reuse project in the future. And then I'll discuss the next steps. In California Water Code 13560 and 13569, which was based on two Senate bills, Senate Bill 918 and 322, the state is required to evaluate the feasibility of developing regulations for potable reuse. Basically, can we develop regulations? It's not saying the state is, I want to say there's a difference between are they feasible and do we have them? And so they're at this point just determining whether it's feasible to develop future regulations. So they just released a draft report on the feasibility of developing regulations, and it's needs to be finalized and presented to the legislature by December 31st of 2016. So direct potable reuse is advanced treated recycled water that would be put directly into a public water system or a water supply immediately upstream of a treatment plant. No other state has developed regulations specifically for direct potable reuse. As I mentioned earlier, there are regulations that allow for indirect potable reuse, which is putting the advanced treated recycled water into a groundwater basin, for example, or a very large surface water reservoir such as Cachuma. That is happening in the state of California. This is the next step of eliminating that environmental buffer and putting it directly into the distribution system. So this is a diagram of the treatment process for direct potable reuse, and here's El Estero wastewater treatment plant. It would go into equalization tanks and then microfiltration. This is currently the level of treatment that the city has for our recycled water that's used for non-potable use. And then we'd have to add potentially UV disinfection here. We'd add a reverse osmosis treatment plant, UV advanced oxidation process, and then it would go into engineered storage buffer. This is to allow for a response time in the event that there are any issues detected. The engineered storage allows for response time before it then goes into the distribution system. So the state has reviewed recommendations from an expert panel and an advisory group that was put together to evaluate direct potable reuse, and the findings were that regulations for direct potable reuse are attainable. However, there are some challenges and knowledge gaps exist, so research is necessary to assure adequate public health protection before adopting uniform criteria. So the state is recommending that a blue ribbon panel be convened to review scientific literature and report on the knowledge of the risks of emerging contaminants, consider use of probabilistic quantitative microbial risk assessment, QMRA, to evaluate performance and reliability of direct reuse, work with the regional water quality control boards to include monitoring of pathogens in raw wastewater, and work with the local agencies to determine the feasibility of collecting data on the concentrations of pathogens. They also recommend that research be conducted on options for final treatment processes that provide attenuation with respect to potential chemical peaks, and to develop more comprehensive analytical methods to identify low molecular weight unknown contaminants, essentially to identify contaminants that are not currently known, and to convene technical work groups to address knowledge gaps regarding resiliency to treatment. So, in general, the city agrees with the findings and recommendations of the report. And in terms of the city's planning, in the absence of uniform criteria and knowing really what would be required for approval of a project, the cost and schedule for developing a direct potable reuse supply is difficult for us to predict. And we had other comments on the report that were more detailed, mostly clarification and providing some technical options for some of the issues addressed. I wasn't going to go into the details of the comments. Those were provided as a part of the Water Commission packet. And I would welcome any comments on that response to the state. If you have any, maybe we can discuss at the end of the presentation. So implications for city planning. There's several requirements that may be expected based on what's in the draft report. This includes an enhanced source control program, basically controlling what gets into the wastewater system. Pathogen monitoring in both the raw wastewater and the secondary effluent. And this would include sampling of virus, protozoa, and surrogate organisms. And then the QMRA analysis of the pathogen data. It would require multiple independent barriers for pathogens. I described this briefly on the diagram we looked at earlier, but it would require microfiltration, reverse osmosis, UV AOP, the advanced oxidation process, and then an engineered storage buffer of at least 30 minutes to allow for response time if anything is detected in the system. Multiple independent barriers for chemical constituents. So this would be the RO and UV AOP at a minimum, and potentially granular activated carbon treatment. We would need defined critical control points and parameters to assess the process performance and operations at each step, basically advanced system monitoring, and would need techniques to have real-time data, alarms and controls for detection and response. The engineered storage buffer would be designed to enable that response time. And then consideration of non-treatment barriers. What that means is operator training and wastewater treatment plant optimization of the operations. Excuse me. So next steps, the city comments on the draft report are due by October 25th. And so we've prepared a draft and we'll be submitting that shortly. We are holding a public workshop on October 26th, and this is with our technical advisory panel, NWRI, to present the draft results on the city's potable reuse feasibility study that has been underway for a little over a year. That public workshop will present all of the options that we evaluated in terms of technical feasibility for both indirect and direct potable reuse. That's October 26th from 9:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. at City Hall. And I've provided the link here to more information regarding that public workshop. The draft findings are posted on this website, the NWRI website. It's www.nwri-usa.org/Santa Barbara panel. So that's the end of the presentation, and just wanted to bring this to your attention and inform you of the current status that the state is where they are with this. They did provide an implementation plan in terms of the research that's required. I will let you know it didn't appear that there's a schedule for that. And so after this report is finalized regarding the feasibility of regulations, I'm not aware that there is a requirement to take the next step and actually develop the regulations. So I think that's out for further discussion by the state.
All right. Any questions, comments?
Thank you.
I thought the information that we had in the packet with the detailed response was very well done. I don't have any individual comments about that, but it was very thorough, and thanks for doing such a great job on that. As a passing comment, this information may be slightly out of date, but there's a wastewater plant on the north side of Sacramento that discharges secondary effluent to the Sacramento River, and at low flow times, it's approximately a quarter of the flow of the whole river. If assume that gets through the Delta and to Clifton Court, Forebay, our State Water Project water can have a significant, perhaps, content of secondary treated wastewater.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and I think that's part of the challenge here. The state is moving slowly on this. It's frustrating at times, but I think the number one thing is they want to make sure they protect public health, and in particular, there isn't any accidents that occur, because I think a setback like that would put potable reuse back, 50 years if this doesn't go off right. But I think as the Commission knows, there is no new water on this planet. It is all recycled in some format. And I did have an opportunity a while back. I had a reporter out from the East Coast, and the topic of potable reuse came up. And what was interesting, he was, that just sounds appalling. We have all this water. And I go, well, fascinating is you think about the Mississippi River. I mean, in essence, you have all these communities that take water out and put their wastewater back in, and it goes on. It's been going on for 100 years now, and no significant outbreaks have occurred along that stretch. And again, that would probably be deemed an indirect potable reuse procedure there. But it is something that I think most people don't realize, that the water cycle goes on, and most communities do have some level of indirect reuse of their wastewater.
Mr. Chair? I was born and raised in New Orleans, and had I not been there, I might have been 6'4".
Touche. Okay, we're looking for a recommendation to send the letter off, or
We were just
inform
looking for
council,
any input the Water Commission might have on the comment letter, and mostly just to inform you of the current status.
Okay.
I would just second Commissioner Keller's comments on the thoroughness of the letter. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would just make a recommendation, since this letter's coming from the city to the board, to maybe remove the footer of your consultant on there,
Oh,
unless they're going to be signing the letter too. Okay, so we're moving on to agenda item 7D, which is the request to change the future Water Commission time from 9 to 11. I will just first off say I'm okay with that, but I am hesitant to make a decision on this today without the other commissioner members present, unless we have their their thoughts on this already, but I'll take.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to follow up with those commissioners, and assuming they're okay with it, if I have support from you, I will move to have the November Water Commission meetings at 9.
Just, yeah. So.
Okay.
Okay. The November meeting will still be at 8 o'clock. Is 9 o'clock okay with you guys?
Fine with me.
Good.
Councilmember White, good? Yes? Okay. Okay, all right. We will inform the other commissioners about that.
Yes.
Yes, the November meeting will be at 8 o'clock. Okay. Let's see, we can make a recommendation to do that. Do I have a motion to?
Motion to make that change.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Passes unanimously. Okay. We will move on to item number 8, the Water Resources Manager's Report.
So for the sake of time, the packet is before you. If there are any questions, there are no significant changes in the planned use. I will note, and I guess this is, there were 2 days in early October where we actually had to use some potable water in the recycled water system. But I bring that up because I think it's a positive. We were able to get through the entire summer. We did have some challenges with our wastewater flows, which were making it difficult to meet water quality, but we got that under control. And just minimal use of recycled water or potable water in the recycled water system. I've been really pleased with the team and our customers who have reduced their water usage to allow us to get through this summer. And I'm optimistic we'll have our full production by next summer. But we are seeing demand start to wane already, so we expect it to continue to drop as we move into winter. Page 2 is, again, this is kind of that 12-month running average, and you can see where we were in the 90s versus where we are today and how our current water usage is just a tad bit higher, but it really is impressive what kind of water conservation we're seeing. We have our gallons per capita data. We're currently at 87. That's the 12-month running average, although we've been down around 50 at times during the year, which is the state deems 55 gallons per capita per day to be basic health and safety. Our spill goal, skipping to next to last page, we are currently at 6 spills so far this year, and our goal is to be 8 or under. Under 8? Or 8 and under? 8, yeah, under 8. So it's in the realm of possibilities. Again, these spills don't come on a regular occurrence, and certainly our staff are doing everything they can to make sure we do not have one. I also included in your packet a graphic here. It is a snapshot of the remaining water in Kachuma. And this wasn't included to just as information. You can see the pink, that's our carryover. The city owns the majority of that. Actually, I want to say ours is about 1,300 acre feet of that 2,300 acre feet that's left. This belongs to the city. But we will, this is as of September 30th. We expect that 1,300 acre feet will be gone by December. Imported water stored. You can see over to the side, they're now accounting for who owns that 1,682 acre feet of imported water. The city has about 864, the largest share of that. B&A account, this is the Below Narrows account, has a positive balance of 2438. This is where the math gets a little fuzzy. The minimum pool, which is supposed to be 12,000 acre feet, If you take into consideration the A&A account, the downstream user account, which is a negative balance of 4346, the minimum pool actually sits with 7,731 acre feet of water. So that's kind of just a summary of where we are with the current remaining water in the lake. And if there aren't any questions, that concludes my...
Could you explain a little more about the A&A negative amount?
I will try. So, as you may recall, in August, the downstream, well, they started in July, the downstream users began to do their release. And we found out in mid-August that there is a clause in a 1973 state water rights orders that allows them to basically do a negative release. And this negative release, the story is when they do these releases, they're targeting the below Narrows area, which is a stretch of river downstream of Buellton. And if that water doesn't make it to the below Narrows account, they're allowed to release negative credits. And that's, in essence, what they were doing here is they were releasing A&A water they didn't have in order to try and get their B&A water into the targeted area. It's a very complicated formula they came up with, and I think in summary that the real disappointment was how it was communicated. It appears that it was a legal move. It just would have been great to know that going into the release, not finding out after the release was going on, and so it has severely compromised the position of the minimum pool at this point, and that's what has a lot of us on the South Coast concerned about where we're headed.
So did water physically get to below Buellton?
A portion of it did. They had hoped for more, but I think due to some pretty significant pumping going on in the A&A stretch, it didn't make it to the B&A. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes, I just wanted to. I didn't have anything formally set up to talk about CCWA or. Well, I mean, I touched on all of those. Is there any questions, or I guess at this point, Councilmember White, is there anything do you think we've left off on the discussion at the?
Well, I think that would be good to have at some point maybe even 3 slides, each one of showing a cartoon of what the 3 organizations are.
Okay.
The alphabet soup of CCWA, COMB, and then CCRB. And I think that's just, it's helpful. I know for me, and I wasn't until I was sitting on all of those boards that I got to learn what those boards were. And that is I, who've been working in water here for most of my adult life. And so how can our community understand it? I think that's a real opportunity to expand people's awareness of this intricate network of organizations that perform the miracle of getting water to this place. And so I think to have those little bits of graphics might help in going forward. It's really quite something. It's literally our century of urban water of water development here that's created those organizations, and it'd be helpful for not only commissions to understand it, but to then and is this being televised, by the way? So then this information gets out to the community more, and obviously as we're working on the new apportionments of Kachuma going forward. This televising, is this the only, and this, and then I think this might be the only forum for getting that information out to the community. So I think it'd be helpful if we can do that going forward. And of course, I'm glad to talk about it to the best that my little now 1 year window into participating in these. I would be glad to talk about it.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember White, I do think this would probably be timed well. We've been trying to line up a window for Jim Stubchair, the former Public Works Director for the county, to come speak and provide some history on water, development of water in the community, and maybe we can kind of time those together, have him come speak with us as well.
Former county flood control engineer and water agency manager, and then chair of the State Water Quality Control Board in his retirement. And now Jim is in his 80s and is still a proverbial Swiss watch of both thought and presentation. He really does a wonderful job of sharing his life's work with us.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I support that. That sounds like a great topic to get some info on. Okay. Next scheduled meetings, Thursday, November 17th at 8 a.m. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I actually have two comments at the end of the meeting. I probably would come under the manager's report, but one is I did attend the Montecito Water District Public Information Meeting on desalination, which was held Tuesday night. It was a public meeting, well attended, probably over 200 people. It was the largest meeting they've ever held. There was a presentation of PowerPoint slides, which their technical consultant put together and presented, both on desal and the status of the negotiations. That's public information, so it's not legal at this point. It's already been distributed to the public. I'd like to see that presentation scanned and given to the rest of the commissioners, because I think, for me, I learned a lot about not just the desal, but where are the negotiations right now. And I know I'm asked a lot as to what's going on with that. It's not our purview, but what is public, basically to bring the commission up to speed. And then just a qualitative issue. We get a lot of paper, and a lot of all the PowerPoints are all done. For me personally, the PowerPoints could just be given to me after the fact electronically, rather than having to Xerox color copies of every single slide, which we do. That's my personal opinion. I don't need all that paper because it's going to get round filed when I leave here. So I'd prefer just to get the PowerPoints in electronic version after the meeting.
I'd second that. I've got a lot of papers to shuffle through here, but
Happy to assist.
okay. Thank you guys for coming out. I will note that we do have a public comment section that is at the beginning of the meeting. If you'd like to make a public comment, make sure you're here at the beginning so we can get you in when that agenda item is called. So, all right, with that, meeting adjourned.